everybody. My name's Sam Perlick. My contact info and my wife's are both in the chat. So Team Perlick, we're at West Point for almost 4 years now, but as a result of some weird circumstances, we're actually still at West Point. Neither of us is teaching anymore. I was an infantry guy turned ORSA. My wife is an aviator. I'm like 90 days out of the Army. I'm not just completely blowing off grooming standards. But we spent, I taught for 3.5 years in BSNL. My wife taught for 3 years in SOC. And then I ended up on the wrong end of a PEB, MEB. So I exited the Army about 90 days ago, and I'm just now Mr. Perlick, which is great, but it was recent enough that I think most of what I know about MACP still applies. We're here, I think I mentioned, my wife just finished ILE. We're en route to Fort Carson in the next 30 to nobody knows how many days. So that's us.
Hi guys, I'm Annie, and Gabe keeps popping into my weird background. There he is. And then he was playing with it, so sorry if we're distracting everyone, but hey, we're having fun during this COVID-19 time. So we're MACP as well. I teach in BSNL while I'm about to leave here in, I don't know, in either 5 weeks or 5 months, who knows. And Gabe is stationed at Fort Belvoir. So we're kind of the circumstance of making the choice to do the geo batch situation because we both had our dream jobs. He was serving as a senior or as an instructor pilot in the UC-35 and the C-12 down for OSA. And then I got to teach in BSNL, which is the greatest job in the world. But we decided that we had to curtail after 2 years, and we're trying to get to Germany next month. So we did manage to do the commute and make things happen. And we are super lucky right now during this COVID time because he got stop moved here during a crazy spring break situation. So we're not complaining because we've had 2 months together, which we haven't had in about 20 months. So we're embracing this circumstance. But we are happy to talk through, ask any questions to us. I'm AG and he's a warrant officer too. So we kind of have like the different dynamics going on with the different branch managers and how everything gets handled. So.
Good evening. My name is Tara, my husband Arthur here. We're both at West Point as instructors. We went to different grad schools, also got into our dream schools, so we ended up separating for those 2 years. But now I teach in BSNL with Annie and Jake and used to be Sam. And then Arthur is teaching in systems engineering. So, that's it.
All right, hey everybody. So I'm Logan. This is my wife Anita. So we're both 09 grads. So she works in DPE, and I work now in physics and nuclear engineering. So we're going for most beloved couple. But so we did the grad school thing.
We had a unique situation where, because he's dean side, I'm commandant side. I got 1 year of grad school, he got 2. So we purposely chose a grad school that was near to West Point, and for 1 year while he was still in school, and I brought the boys, we have 2 kids, I brought the boys here to West Point to get started. He would commute home on the weekends and continue his school. So we have that, and my department allowed me to stay an extra year. So I'm in my 4th year of teaching, he's into his 3rd year. And so then after this year, we should be heading out. We also have experience with, he went to satellite ILE. So if anybody wonders about doing that, I stayed here. We were both engineers before, and now we're both functional areas. So we've also dealt with switching over to that and balancing that with two different careers. So, and like I said, 2 kids, 2nd grade and kindergarten. So if you have questions about that, we can help you with that too.
And McDaniel, sorry for the typo.
Hello everyone, Alfred and Tiara McDaniel here. We're just finishing up our year of grad school. I'll be headed off to the prep school to be a TAC officer, and Tiara will be headed to the assignment center. I have 2 kids, both MACP, we're in MACP as well, both AG officers. If there's anything else you want to add?
Nothing specifically. No. Hello everyone. Hi, hello. I'm Ashley. This is Josh Abraham. I'm an aviation officer. Say hey. He's about to be 9 months old. I'm an aviation officer. I'm currently I just finished my first year at Duke University. I'll be going to BSNL. This is my husband, Josh. You want to say who you are?
Armor officer in the National Guard in North Carolina. We were both active, and then I stepped out because it was going to be a better family situation with this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm currently in grad school, applying to med school for the fall.
Awesome. I think that's everybody. If you are here interested in teaching, go ahead and introduce yourself. We'll start with Grady.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rosie Grady, and this is my husband, Christopher Grady. We are going to be starting the ELDP in May of 2021. I'm a medical service officer. My husband is an infantry officer, and we have 2 kids as well, one 6-month-old and one 3-year-old. Nice to meet everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Moore, and this is my husband, Colin. We're also stationed at Fort Carson, and I'm a medical service officer, and he's field artillery. We're 2015 grads, and we're hoping to instruct in BSNL, looking at academic year 2022. So nice to meet everyone.
Hi, I'm Chris Lovis. My wife, Amy Lovis, is the one that's bringing us potentially to West Point. She's a 2013 grad. She's coming home from work right now. 2013 grad, hoping to either be a TAC or teach in the math department. I'm hoping to get a job, hopefully with BSNL. I am a major in the Air Force, doing intel at Peterson Air Force Base, and she is a Delta Company commander for H-64 Fort Carson. So that's us.
Megan, you out there? Megan or Jacqueline, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Jacqueline, and this is my husband, Paul. We're coming from Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I am hoping to be there by next year to serve as a TAC officer, and my husband is in recruiting. Nice to meet everyone.
Thanks. Astrid or Constance, you're out there?
Hey, it's Astrid Wing. I'm actually in quarantine right now prior to deployment. My service sucks right now. My husband's not with me because I wasn't allowed to pack him in my bag. Just kidding. So he's on a call and he's not able to join us right now. I'm AG. I'm looking to possibly work with the BSNL department in the near future. And I'm currently stationed in Savannah, Georgia, which is absolutely beautiful. And yeah, I think that my husband's field artillery. He's currently with Ranger Regiment, and I'm here with SOAR.
Any other introductions out there? I know people might have to break off before we open Q&A. Oh, there's somebody jumping in. All right. Hey, so I do want to open up to any initial thoughts from any of our MACP couples who are in the pipeline or been in about that process broadly, and then open up to Q&A. So any lessons learned from those who've navigated it? Yeah, Sam, go ahead.
Sure. So Jake was like kind of half joking about how many MACP couples I've talked to about this, but the number one thing that I would say is be transparent as possible. A a lot of couples or officers that I spoke to who were initiating this process thought it was some kind of a game where you had to like pull a bait and switch to convince West Point to hire both of you. And that's like, that couldn't be further from the truth. Be totally transparent, be like, yes, I'm MACP, my spouse or significant other is considering X, Y, and Z. I'm considering A, B, and C. There's incredibly good crosstalk between departments. Jake and Annie can attest to that in their like personnel role capacities, but as kind of like someone who is hired and just kind of watched it happen since. Departments are very good at talking about this kind of thing, and I would encourage you to be, you know, upfront and forthright about the situation and not approach it as some game where you have to like cleverly get both of you hired or something like that. It's remarkable how many people are like, well, and if we want to tell them that this is happening, and you're like, yeah, like why would you not? And maybe that's just an aversion that we all have from dealing with assignment officers over our careers or something like that. But I'll tell you that, sorry, Annie, I saw that reaction. But transparency and being forthright and upfront, I think is a big money maker in this process. So
to add on to that, I think an important lesson as you go into the process is to cast a wide net. So shameless plug, you have a home in the House of Pain. We are hungry for good instructors. You don't need to be a physics major or any of that. We'll take you breathing. We'll take you. Not that much, but seriously, various departments have different capacities for accepting people. So, you know, for example, I think the MEC department gets a lot of applicants, right? But other departments might not. And so, like that out there. Also, they've been incredibly helpful to us. Like, I'm the one who initiated. I said, I want to come back, and my department immediately said yes, and called DPE and said, we really want this person. Can you fit, you know, them? And she was a great fit with DPE. You know, but we do lots of this. Our department recently just took a husband so that the wife could go to a different department, knows nothing of physics. We taught him everything, it's fine. But cast a wide net.
Yeah, this is Arthur Millbrooks. I'm again in systems, the systems department, and I'll just echo what Sam and Logan kind of said. Is in terms of the interplay between departments, I think that happens, you know, quite often. You know, it happened for Tara and I. You know, we were actually sitting in the car at Fort Carson, driving away from Jimmy John's when systems called me and asked me if I wanted the job, and then put me on hold to then go talk to BSNL to confirm that Tara wanted the job. So that like all happened within like 3.5 minutes of us going from Jimmy John's back to the car. So I think that happens, you know, quite often. Then even for us, I'm the S1 for systems, and we actually just did the same thing that Logan talked about. We really wanted an officer, and she was like, hey, I'm dual military. And so we found him a home in CME. And so please be as transparent as possible, and we will all happily work with you guys to make whatever, you know, your family situation work, you know, within the confines of what you guys want and also what's good for us. So I'll just second all that.
So any questions from our potentially inbound faculty or any concerns? Liz, you look like you're muted. Oh, hey, Kelsey, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Sorry.
Hi, yes, I think she did look like she was trying to speak, so I didn't want to cut in. But I'm Captain Chelsea Young. My husband is probably a couple minutes behind me. We're on Mountain Time standard, so we were just getting off work and trying to rush to kind of make this Zoom call. But yes, we're both, I don't know it's already been discussed, but we're both transitioning to the BSNL department as well. Matt is scheduled to work in the management side of the house, and I'm going to be in the psychology side of the house. We're both excited just kind of hearing a little bit of the tidbit of the stories. I chuckled just a little bit because I felt like I had a little bit of kind of that, shock of us both being able to attend and serve in the same department. So I look forward to kind of how the conversation goes, but and I'll probably have some even questions of my own and maybe can answer some for those pursuing. But thank you for having me on, sir. So.
Hey, sorry about that. My name is Captain Lizette Donaldson. I'm currently scheduled to join the ELDP program. Can you hear me?
You can.
Okay, so I just want to know if kind of what the MACP couples have experienced as far as it's going to sound like a really basic question, but work schedules, especially if one was working for USCC and the other was working for, as a TAC officer, vice versa. So just how that is balanced out for real, like in the you guys are in it now. So that's my question.
So I think some of it depends on the department and the position, certainly, but in general, I mean, speaking from our experience, it's been very accommodating. So I go into work. I mean, my first class typically is at 8:50, so I go in slightly before that. I am always home by 1700. In fact, I usually leave by 1600 because I OIC one of the sports teams. So we just trade off on, one of us takes the kids into school, the other one picks them up. But there's been less than 5 times I can count when both of us haven't been home for dinner.
Yeah, and when it comes to being on the commandant side, like summer training is a lot different for DPE. We're there every morning with the new cadets, that sort of thing. So I have that in the morning, but being on the dean side, he doesn't. So we're able to balance that pretty well. Sometimes it means that we don't see each other as much that we'd like to, but it works for our kids. And we also, you can get the key and essential personnel if you have children, and if you take them to the full-time childcare, you get key and essential personnel memo, and you get a little bit of a grace period, about 30 minutes, where you can be late picking them up and not be penalized.
This is easily, hands down, the most family time I have ever had in the Army. Like, yeah. Unquestionably, there is no comparison.
Yeah, I would add, so one thing Logan in particular mentioned, this is the ultimate kind of big kid rules place, at least BSNL is. I can tell you, I'm not sure once in 3.5 years, everyone ever questioned what time I came to work, what time I left, what I was wearing when I showed up, when I did PT. That said, like, you will work your butts off. Like, it is a lot of work. In exchange for some flexibility in the morning, Kearney and I have 2 small kids too. So exactly what Logan and Anita were saying, like, we traded off who took the kids to the CDC in the morning. And the trade-off is, like, you get to be home and, like, make breakfast and take the kids, but, like, you might be doing some grading for a couple hours after you put them to bed at night too. So don't let anyone make you think this is like a take a knee thing. Like, you still will work your butt off, but you have ultimate flexibility in terms of when and how you get that work done. And then the other thing I would mention, I agree 100% with Logan's comment about, like, count on one hand the number of times you missed a meal involuntarily. The exception is the summertime. So I was a company mentor for CLDT. And so that was just like being in the field for 3 weeks, but that was kind of a one-off experience. It was a blast. I loved it. It was very, very different than, like, the classroom experience. And I would highly encourage anyone who has the opportunity to do that kind of thing, but know that felt a lot like the Army, like, go to the field for 3 weeks type situation. So, for what it's worth.
I'll jump in and say, so I was up here with a 2-year-old. Well, at the time when I got here, I had a 10-week-old and a 6-year-old, and now they're obviously 2 and 8. And I'd say there was under 5 times where it was a hardship for me to navigate my schedule. And there's always somebody either willing to accommodate or finding a friend that would jump in and support. Like without, it was crazy. Like it never really became complicated. The first year I wasn't considered key admission essential at the daycare. I don't know why. So once the snow days would hit, that was usually my biggest challenge. And I just took the kids to work. And so they taught class with me and the cadets really liked it. And so there's always kind of like this crazy option in the background. And it really was kind of some unique bonding time. And I do teach marriage and the family, so that was somewhat value added to the lesson. But like Sam said, I think don't be fooled that you're not going to like work your butt off, I think was his quote, because you do, and you navigate those schedules differently. But I also made it a point to walk Gabriel to his bus every morning. And then if that meant that I was laying in bed at night grading papers, and that was cool with me, because it was more important for me to have that less rush time in the morning with him and see him a little bit longer. So, I mean, I'm happy to share lots of other anecdotes, but I think that it's just the most adaptable environment I've ever seen to take care of your family.
Talking about the sense of community that Annie mentioned, I'll just jump in. I do want to say, to more than any other place that we've lived, it's like being an episode of Leave It to Beaver. It's right, like kids are running in and out of people's houses and playing, and it's just, you know, everyone's in the backyard having a barbecue. I woke up one morning and our neighbor's son was watching TV at our house. It's kind of silly, but you know, we just haven't experienced that anywhere else, because everyone's at the same point in their career. Everyone's got kids about the same age. That part's really fun.
So Alfred and I will share our ELDP experience. We have two daughters, one who is 19 months old, and then we have a 14-year-old. So when we first got to West Point, we both went through the ELDP program. So the scheduling was definitely crazy due to the nighttime classes. And of course, CDC doesn't accommodate after 17:30. So we ran into an issue there because most of the classes throughout the entire year were night classes. So for us, we had to look into hiring an au pair to help us navigate this crazy time. And it was definitely some late nights, early mornings, just because we both were going through it. So we're looking forward to this year as he serves at the prep school, and I'll be at the Simon Center. So hopefully that scheduling clears up a lot more.
Would anyone mind speaking on like the transitioning from grad school to West Point and how difficult that was, and when to actually look for a house, on post, off post, like those simple PCS type questions?
When we need to start looking at CDC to try and get our kid in and all that good stuff.
I know for us, the CDC, looking at CDC should happen, I would think, like 6 months in advance, just because when we started our time here, we applied for CDC in January or December, and we were still not able to get a spot because they were so full. But they had other options. I think it's the Child America fee, something like that, but they offer assistance to those daycares that are off post.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll have to look at the child care thing again. I tried to do that a few months ago, and they were like, no, you're not stationed here or whatever. And they're like, try back another time. So
Actually, shoot me a note and I'll tell you how to do it. Or if anybody else has questions on that, but you actually have to fill it out online for the militarychildcare.com piece, and then get on the wait list as soon as you get on the wait list now. And you can just update the date of your arrival. But like Tiara was mentioning, Military Child Care Aware does offset fees if for some reason you can't get a slot at CDC, which you will have the highest priority of getting a slot short of a single soldier. Either dual military or geographically separated military always have the highest priorities. So if for some reason you can't get one at the Child Development Center, then Child Care Aware will offset those costs for you.
Yeah, that website, we signed up our unborn child. To Jake's point, both of our kids were born here, and like as soon as we found out Kearney was pregnant, we like input. It was a running joke for first name. It just said TBD Perlick. So you can put an unborn child in there. There's no limit on lead time or anything else. Like you should literally like do it today and make your best guess of arrival date and let the process work.
With regards to living off post, so we don't have kids, so we didn't have much to say about the childcare issues on post. But we did end up purchasing. I went to Columbia for grad school, so we bought a house a year before actually I started teaching. So the process on post is, I'm sure you guys have all experienced living on post of military, but we found that just given what we wanted in the housing, we wanted to go off post. And just a heads up, in state of New York, taxes are incredibly expensive. So don't be fooled by what they say, estimate on Zillow and stuff. And there's a couple areas to look at that are within people say Cornwall, which is like 15 minutes north, is really far because it feels far because it's over a mountain, but it's really not. I can get door to door in like 15 minutes. So there is some good areas around, good school districts, yes, hence why the taxes are so high. But there are some small towns around West Point, mostly to the west and north, that would be accommodating for larger families, or just any families. So if there are questions about how we approach moving off post and where we looked, we're happy to talk about that as well.
And I'll tack onto that. We had never lived on post before, and we're kind of skeptical, like, oh, we're not on post people, like that kind of thing. I don't know if any of you were in that mindset. But Logan and Anita alluded to this, like that's no joke. Like we live in Lee neighborhood, and there's like flocks of children running by. We're in a Quint, there's 5 units. We adore every single one of the people in our building. We hang out with them all the time. So even if you're like, that's not really us, give it a serious thought, because it's a pretty magical place to be on post. That said, Cornwall, are you in Cornwall, Arthur and Tara?
Yes, we're in Cornwall. So.
That's an awesome little town. That's like by far the best restaurants in the area.
They do.
We know it.
And they have a killer 4th of July.
You got Shades, which still sucks.
Yeah, but it's a good area to live in. We definitely say there is the lack of community because we're with like a whole bunch of old people in our neighborhood. So that is something that you'd be trading off if you do live off post. You don't get that like stumble into people on your walks after work or whatever. But good people, yeah, good people.
So I remember the feeling prior to coming, and I think it's a feeling you have every time you start a new, UPCS, a new place, and it's that the stress of like, I need to in process and I need to do that and I have to make the right impression, and if I don't check off everything, and so I felt that coming in, and everybody was kind of like, hey, do those things, but chill out. And now that I'm on the other side, so I'm running our new instructor training for our department. It's kind of comical watching everybody, because from this side, we are tremendously, accommodating. We're just about, hey, you're a part of our family. This is a strange thing you've never done before, and we want to help you through that process, right? I mean, so no one should abuse that, but take comfort in knowing that there's a real sense of family in the community and with the departments that they're here to help.
For those of you who went to Columbia for your master's, how often were you attending class at Columbia versus if there was a satellite class at West Point a week?
So I know for Tiara and I, on Mondays we had typical classes down at Columbia, and then on Tuesdays we had classes at West Point, and then during this, because there's split up into 3 semesters, so the summer semester we had classes at Columbia on Mondays and Thursdays, and then 2 classes at West Point on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. In the fall semester, pretty much along the same lines, Mondays and Wednesdays at Columbia, and then Tuesdays at West Point. And then for the spring semester, we had about the same thing, Monday, Wednesday, and Tuesdays.
And then Saturday and Sunday classes as well.
And then there are some Saturday and Sunday classes sprinkled in there for some elective courses, but they're pretty much like 2 Saturdays out of the month, if that.
Hi, I'm Amy. Sorry, a little late to this meeting. But so if you're going back and forth from West Point and Columbia, like where do you recommend living? In the West Point area or downtown? And then how do you travel back and forth? Were you taking the train or were you driving a lot? It just sounds like a lot of logistics kind of go into that.
Well, not really. I guess it depends on what floats your boat, I guess. So Alfred and I, we live in Salisbury. That's right outside of Cornwall and Val's Gate. So we lived there and we drove in most of the time. And we enjoyed it because it gave us the time to kind of breathe a bit and enjoy the city as well.
And then for some, you can actually, with the transportation office, get like a MTA card. So if you do take the train, they give you a monthly allotment where you can take the train or subways or anything like that as well.
So I was an ELDP. I did a 2-year program at Teachers College, which is the same location. And I did do the public transportation on most times that I had to go out of the city, which was about 3 days a week. And I lived in Cornwall. So in total, it is a bit of a long commute if you do public transportation. So it was like 35 minutes to the train station, 35 minutes on the train, 20 minutes on the subway. So it was quite long, especially for the late night classes that we had. So just something to think about, unless you're also getting the BAH for living in New York City. I got that BAH and it was still really expensive to find more than a few hundred square feet. And if I would consider, there was a town called Terrytown, which is like just outside of like the main city area, north of Manhattan. And it was a little bit less expensive than the city, but a little bit easier commute if you're not interested in going all the way up to West Point. So just something to think about. Anything along the Metro North would be easy access to get to Columbia.
And I mean, so grads remember this, but to Tara's point, the Metro North is on the other side of the river from West Point. So if you're going to live up here, and this is even for like recreation stuff, it's kind of getting across the river to get on the Metro North is a not inconsequential addition to any trip to the city. So
I perfected the fastest route public trans. If you have questions, let me know.
So just to clarify, you have the ability of moving after that year, after that grad school year, you have the ability of moving again once you start your tenure?
Only, I believe ELDP are supposed to live up near West Point. I think that's where their duty station is. Mine was Fort Jackson, like any other ACS. So I was able to move in between my time of grad school and up here. I don't know anyone in ELDP that has done that, because you would have to pay your own move from the city back to West Point if you were stationed at West Point.
So for officers who are in ELDP, you receive Westchester County BH, or Orange County, which isn't low, but it's not Manhattan.
For context, I would
exceptions to that. Yeah, that's true. So typically, and it's appropriate for this conversation, is it used to be about half the cohort lived in Manhattan and half lived up at West Point. Now it's a handful. It's either typically sometimes single officers, usually MACP, because if you're drawing double BAH for Orange County, you can afford maybe Manhattan, depending on children and those kind of things as well. But that move after that 1 year at Columbia is at your expense. So the Army won't cover that. They won't treat it as a PCS from moving up from Manhattan to West Point. So some people like the ability to move to West Point, establish roots, and stay there for 4 years, even if there's some commuting in that first year. And then with children in terms of schools and some of those opportunities as well. So you can live in the city. Some have, and they love it. But after that first year, if you want to, you will be required to come up to West Point. I guess that's not true. Some TACs did commute to their daily jobs from kind of northern Manhattan or Harlem, but I wouldn't encourage that as a TAC. But it's still an option out there on the table for you. But those are some considerations.
Hey, Jake, can we jump back to Ashley's question? Because I think I have a good Team Perlick answer, and I need to go in about 5 minutes, if that's cool. Cool. So, Ashley, to your question about timeline, that's like an endless conversation that people at West Point have, mostly around ILE, to be honest. Once you get here and you're like hitting senior captain promotable years, it's like all everyone talks about is ILE, venue, and it's kind of exhausting, frankly. But before that, so my wife and I, we were offset by 6 months. She was an aviator that did her first year out of flight school in Korea, and I was an infantry guy that ended up in and out of command reasonably early for my year group. So I was complete with command before she even went into command, and we made it work basically with a 6-month offset. So she found a program that allowed her to start, like a 2-year grad school program that allowed her to start in January. And SOCH was all about it. They're like, yeah, 6 more months for you to finish up your command time, get a good OER, start this program. Great. So I did my first semester of business school while she was still in command at Fort Hood. I moved to Boston, did a semester of grad school. She joined me in Boston. We overlapped there for 1.5 years. And then I did my first semester teaching at West Point while she was finishing up in Boston. That's a little bit of an outlier, but again, I'll tell you, it felt like everybody here was bending over backwards to be supportive and make it work. So again, I would reiterate what I was saying before about transparency. If you have concerns about timelines, like, well, I'm not going to have an OER until this date, or like I'm, deploying on this date, just have the conversation and think, like, partake in the creative thinking process. Cause we thought we were the luckiest people alive that we managed to pull that off. And we were just like waiting for HRC to call us and tell us to get our asses back to Fort Hood or something, but it can be done. And there's really no limit to like the kinds of creative solutions that you can work out. So don't think that it's a lost cause. If you have some complication like that, bring it up, have the conversation, and then think creatively about how to do it. So.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's very reassuring to hear.
And like, just, I guess, to kind of build off of Sam's point about maybe applying to graduate schools and kind of looking at different programs after you've kind of gone through the selection process. Like Tara and I, coming from 2 different disciplines, systems engineering and BSNL, there's certainly some overlap in schools, but there's also a lot of divergence. So we applied to a lot of different schools. We applied to like 7 different schools, all trying to make sure we were geographically at least in the same like kind of driving and or train distance. So just kind of one thing to think about. And we had to do the grad school thing kind of split ops. I was in Boston, Tara was in New York, and we just did the train every other weekend. And so we traded locations, and certainly not ideal. And I don't think anything, I don't think anybody would say they want to be away from their family or away from their spouse. But just as Sam said, you had to be creative about the solutions for getting OERs and command timelines. The same thing I think also goes for ACS and looking at different graduate programs to make sure there's some commonality. And again, be open with your department. Like, they will help shape that and help you get to where you need to be.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, with as far as programs are concerned, I know that most programs can give you a little leeway in like maybe the exact topic that you're doing. So I was exploring all types of social psych, IO psych, and so I applied to PhD programs, got into a few of those just to make sure that like no matter where he ended up, I could have an option. So it required a little bit of like strategizing. Okay, what is close enough to be something I need to serve the department well, but also something that would accommodate him. So it was a bit of a strategic. We had like all sorts of maps, trying to coordinate what were the best options for us. So just something to think about if you're in different disciplines, and trying to figure out the best way to come back and fulfill all those gates.
Yeah, I agree completely. And that was, so to Arthur and Tara's point, we got really lucky on that front too. I mean, we focused our search in Boston, New York, and DC, because we, especially on the back end, we knew we wanted to start having kids, and we wanted like that 6 months when I was here at West Point and she was still in school, we wanted to be like weekend accessible for that semester. And again, we got lucky. We both got into programs we really, really liked in Boston, but we would have happily done like New York, Boston, or like New York, DC, something like that too. we weren't ready to do like East Coast, West Coast. I'm sure some people would, or maybe have. I don't know of anyone off the top of my head, but you know, you can shape it for sure.
So one other thing to that point, I'm not dual military, I'm not MACP, but you have to be your own best advocate. So you've got to, let us in the department help creatively think of the solutions. But you also got to be your advocate, because your branch managers are going to fight to keep you geographically together, as they should, and that's their job. And sometimes they start to get concerned when they're like, wait a minute, your schools are 5 hours apart, you're not together. That's a deal breaker, because they feel like it's going to come back on them somehow. And so you have to be your own advocate, even with your branch reps and your branch managers as you're working through the process. Because at some point they start to hand you over to us and to the Army Civil Schooling Group, but they still keep tabs on you like they should as a good branch rep. And so you've got to be open with them if you're considering options where you're like, listen, we're okay with a New York, Boston type scenario and everybody's on board with it. But you've got to be your own advocate to that end.
In keeping with the idea of that Jonathan had said about being an advocate for yourself, also, so several departments have relationships with universities or say, hey, here's the list of options. Know that those aren't an all-inclusive list necessarily. So for example, my wife in DP, they had specific universities they could go to, and that just didn't work out for us. And so we said, hey, well, let's apply to other universities anyway. Same thing for me, that we're out of the things that they said were okay. We're going to apply anyway and see if we can strike a deal. So I ended up going to Yale. They only had a 1-year master's program. I had to be gone for 2 years. Took 2 masters. Right. So they are a high cost school. I did not get a high cost billet. And so they came back and said, well, you're not going to be able to go. You didn't get a high cost billet. So I reached out to the school and said, hey, this is the maximum amount of money they will pay for me to go to school. And Yale said, sure, that'll be the amount of money it costs for you to go to school for us. Congratulations. The guaranteed paycheck from the government is a strong motivator and bargaining chip with any school. So if you get a low cost billet, talk to them and see if they'll charge you less.
They can kind of connect the dots with their yellow ribbon program. So you can query and see if they're doing the yellow ribbon program. I did that same thing. It was during the sequestration too. They weren't even handing out high cost spots for ACS that year. So I was like, oh, I got into MIT, and they're like, oh yeah, right. University of Phoenix. How about that? And so I went to MIT and was like, look, this is the number. Like, this isn't a negotiation. Just this is the number. And like 2 days later, they're like, yeah, we just figured out with yellow ribbon, you're good. So that's another one of those things. Like, if you don't ask the question, you'll never know. So.
Sam, all right. Hey, as we're thinking through some other questions, I did want to share a few things as a personnel officer. I think like Anita, I stayed for 4 years. Excited to get back to the force. Really excited about Fort Bliss. But I did want to share a few things, lessons learned in terms of MACP couples. And one of them, as you advocate for yourself, we would encourage you to kind of apply on your own. Each of you should be fighting to get into separate departments. Each of you should be completing your entire packets. Don't apply by yourself and then have your spouse kind of come up on the net later in the game. A big piece of that is senior raters. Department heads, 06 colonels, have almost complete autonomy on who they bring in their department. With that, they're not incredibly supportive of MACP in the same department. You think about, you might have the same rater and senior rater. A couple of my classmates got married, same branch, same department, teaching the same course for 3 years. That was incredibly rare. VTD affords some opportunity to allow you as tax to be in separate regiments, right? Maybe the same senior rater, but make sure you're both advocating for yourself in separate venues. So you get those calls like Arthur and Tara did, where you both got hired for the record, we wanted Tara first. I know you told that story kind of weird, Arthur, but whatever. You know, we advocate for each other, and we crosstalk with that. We create incredibly creative solutions, whether it's 6 months apiece, whether it's tuition agreements for high cost, top tier schools. We'll figure that out. Don't worry about that. Shoot for the stars, dream big, set that professional, personal goals, and we'll make it work. We want you, especially everybody on this call. You've been screened and you have not been found wanting. We want you here to teach, coach, and mentor cadets. Regardless of degrees or year groups. If your spouse is not an officer, we'll find a way to get them to complete their undergraduate or to complete their master's. There's some creative solutions there while you're at ACS. Sam and Kearney talked about geographic locations. So, you know, the metropolis from DC to Boston has a lot of options. There might be some long drives, but they're close in the sense of being able to see each other. So different year groups, different ranks, a different degree, you know, status in your life will make it happen. I was about to invite a couple power couples. And when I say power couples, I don't, colonels. So we have a few dual military colonels. We have a few like CSL select power couples that both came back to West Point as junior rotators, went on to be battalion commanders, separate branches, or came back here as FA 47. So if you both say, hey, if we go to West Point, one of us eventually has to get out. That's not true. We can make this work so you can serve 20 years, crush it, and still have those opportunities on the table. And the last thing I'll share real quick before I open it up again is that one of my biggest priorities of the last 4 years is recruiting a diverse staff and faculty. And we fully acknowledge that a diverse staff and faculty with racial and gender diversity, a lot of those folks are MACP. And we understand that is important to shaping. Our core cadets is the most diverse it's ever been. As we remove barriers to inclusion across the service, our cadets are about to join as lieutenants to serve the most diverse formation we've ever seen. Their soldiers aren't going to look like them and come from their backgrounds. So being able to have staff and faculty that's representative of that, to teach, coach, and mentor them in the best ways, we want to make this work. We find the best officers out there, and we find creative solutions to get them here as well. So we want you all. We're excited to have you all. And I appreciate everyone taking the time to kind of have some of these discussions. So any questions or concerns about anything we kind of talked about tonight?
Hi. Yeah, I'm about to deploy.
Mm-hmm.
And currently I've been accepted both math and the ELDP programs. And I'm just wondering, like, has anybody worked on that application process to grad school while deployed? And like, how difficult is that? And what does that look like?
So I have not personally done that. So one of the women in my department, I don't know if you know her, Elizabeth Bell is her name. Anyway, she was a pilot in Afghanistan, was selected, went from Afghanistan to graduate school. So, you know, I mean, it's definitely a doable thing. You know, the requirements are still the same. You got to do all the paperwork and stuff. But if you're interested, I'm happy to give you her contact information.
I'll just chime in. So when I was going through the ACS process, I was at Carson 3rd Brigade, getting ready to do the OAR rotation. And so the timing of that coincided with we were leaving in January. So, you know, most applications due in the winter time frame, and then decisions are made, you know, obviously in the early spring. And, you know, obviously some programs have interviews and some don't. For the ones that did, and I made it to the interview round, I just told the admissions officers or admissions reps, like, hey, like, this is my situation. Like, if I'm selected for an interview, just know that this is my problem. And all the schools that had those came back and said, hey, we'll review your application out of cycle, aka early, render you a decision, and call you in for your interview early so that you can do it before you deploy. So I know that doesn't necessarily like work necessarily for your situation, but my experience has been that as long as you're transparent with them and you tell them like, hey, this is my situation, a lot of them, again, to Logan's point, the check is really, really nice. So they're totally fine with trying to find a way to take your money.
Okay, thank you for that information. I appreciate it. I actually still have to take the GRE. I'm trying to figure out how to do that with all this COVID nonsense going on. But I hear that they're doing it online right now or for now. So, but I mean, I deploy in the next month, so I'll probably have to take it online somewhere in Iraq. But it's gonna be fun. I love just figuring crazy things out. It'll be a good time.
Here's what I'd offer to you on. So I wasn't deployed when I was applying to grad schools. I was on GRF. And I just, every grad school application has this segment in it. It's like, is there anything else we need to know? I straight up put that in there. I was like, hey, I'm in the military. I'm assigned to a recall status. That means I can't be like 2 hours away from anywhere. So if accepted in the interviews, I can't physically come to interviews because all the schools I was applying to said, like, you have to come to the school for your interview. And two things. First, they were incredibly accommodating. All of them were willing to do Skype interviews. Second, it made for a great story in the interview that was really sticky and memorable and set me apart. And so I'm not saying like you play the military card, but recognize no matter what program, you're applying for an MBA, you're applying for math, you're applying for physics, you're applying for underwater basket weaving, you are a diversity candidate to that grad school because you are a military veteran. Whether you're active duty or not, they call you a veteran. And so when they're considering your application, they're looking at you compared to the other veterans that are applying, not compared to the other 900 people applying. And so you can't just differentiate by being like, oh, I'm in the military. You differentiate additionally through some of those other like sticky stories, for lack of a better way of putting it. So if your story is, hey, I took my GRE online in Iraq, it's just part of my job. Like, it's what you got to do. That's actually really memorable, and it can really stick out to the interviewer and be the difference maker. So just kind of lean in and embrace it.
And I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. Any other questions out there? Additionally, I will share, tracking everybody in this call. And if they didn't post it in the chat, I will share contact information for anybody on this call. So if you need to start a dialogue, Annie and I are PCSing. We're moving on with our lives. We're going to Bliss and Germany. And JJ is not moving on with his life. So you see him over there in the corner. So if y'all need anything, talk to him. He's your man.
This is my life now.
So no, but like we said earlier, we are absolutely willing to work with you to make that happen. If you're on this call, it's because we see some absolute potential in your demonstrated performance, your careers, and your ability to teach, coach, and mentor cadets. And we're excited to have you join and be a part of our team. So if I don't have any other questions out there or any final thoughts from any of the couples, I'll open it up to their floor. Awesome. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Hey, thank you so much for your time tonight, everyone. God bless. Take care of yourself and your families.
Thank you. Good night.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
I think that went pretty well.
Cool.